Mono really at the time was a means to create applications. It was, can we get high-level languages to improve our productivity and reduce errors, improve the code quality, allow us to get more done with fewer people. And this is the origin of the Mono project.
G'day guys, today I have a very special guest, Miguel de Icaza.
Hey, how's it going?
I want to go back to Mono.
Yes.
Do you remember in the beginning, what was your initial vision of Mono in the very beginning?
Well, we started Mono because at the time I was working on the Linux desktop, and we were high on this idea that we could make an entire open source operating system that could compete with Windows. We thought that we could get there, that there would be a world where everything would be open source. And as we were building this thing, I think we got very far. It's called the GNOME project. And as we're building the GNOME project, with the tools that we're using are fairly primitive. It's C, C++, relatively low-level languages, not very productive, very error-prone, a lot of crashes, long build times. They don't really have support for interfaces. There's a lot of programming idioms that just don't exist that you have to use. And in this time, this is roughly in the year 2000, things like Python and Perl are suitable languages. They're high-level languages, but they're very slow, right? The computers of the time really couldn't run a lot of interpreted code. I mean, you could run it, but it wasn't very performant. So for the desktop, it was kind of out of the equation. And then Microsoft publishes the specs for C#. And we look at this language and we go, this is what we want. Right, and also you have to remember Java didn't get a lot of traction because it was a free Java implementation, but it wasn't open source. So it was difficult to attract the community of people to build an open source Java because after all there was one free. But we were part of a movement that required everything from the ground up to be open source. So we couldn't use Java for that reason, right? Java was out of the question, and there was not enough. There were not enough reasons to rally behind creating an open source implementation. So we couldn't use it. So that was an alternative. And then Microsoft comes with this thing, and it's like, well, it's like Java, but better.
Right.
So we got very jealous, and we spent, we tried a couple of things, like, can we use a high-level language and then interop with low-level languages? So we're doing a lot of work with bindings, a lot of work with interop, work with Corba. We use Corba to
when you're saying we, how many of you?
Well, the GNOME team was about maybe 100 people at the time. So 100 and 120 people. And we're trying to say, can we put an RPC system in place? Can we have a standardized glue system so we could use high-level programming languages to build applications? And that's when .NET comes into the picture. So Mono really at the time was a means to create applications. It was, can we get high-level languages to improve our productivity and reduce errors, improve the code quality, allow us to get more done with fewer people. And this is the origin of the Mono project.
And how successful was Mono? Which countries was it very successful? What communities did you see a lot of it?
What happened with Mono was that while we did get a lot of contributions, it very quickly ran into very tough political battles in the open source world. And the very political battles were, well, what happens if Microsoft sues us one day, right? What happens if Microsoft sues us? And it was basically that scenario. It was an imaginary scenario. And we say, well, we don't think it's going to happen because, Microsoft made this promise, they made this other promise over there, they put this standard over there, they did this thing, and then people say, yeah, but between these two things, there's a gap. What if they sue us for this gap, right? So it was a never-ending battle. So it got politicized very quickly, and there was a group of people that care about open source for the benefits, the rights, the freedoms, what it allowed, the scenarios, what could happen, community. And there was a people that contributed to these efforts, not because they care about these principles, but because they hated Microsoft. So we ended up with a group of people that just didn't trust the project. So it actually was very tough for Mono to get a foothold in the Unix space because of this.
Right.
By the time you watch this video, Microsoft would have announced that not only are they
Miguel was right. They should have open sourced.
yes. Somebody was telling me that last night. Apparently, I made that pitch to Microsoft in 2002 or 3, right. And I'm like, well, it only took 12 years, 13 years. But
well, I can tell you that a lot of the Microsoft regional directors, which I'm one, thought you were right from the beginning.
Well, yeah. Well, it took some time, and when you're watching this, Microsoft will have open sourced the class libraries, and they would have announced their intention to open source the virtual machine. And
does that take you by surprise, knowing Microsoft for so long? And also, did they give you a lot of grief over the years?
I think that the relationship with Microsoft has it went from a position where Microsoft didn't really know what open source was and what Mono was, to a position where they understood both, and it's always been getting better ever since. I've always had a great relationship with the engineers on the .NET team and the Microsoft team, so that was always a great relationship going back to 2000 or 2001, where it was my first ECMA meeting. It was always a very good relationship. But you could tell that the Microsoft people really didn't understand open source in 2000. I remember some meeting where, in the ECMA committee where they said, we're doing this thing and it's going to blow everybody's minds and we can't talk about it, right? And it's, Linux will never be able to catch up. That turned out to be WPF. But so it was always good, but you could tell that at the beginning there was a misunderstanding of where we're coming from, and that thought evolved, and it evolved very quickly. It's just that the public really hasn't, it's come in piecemeals. It's been little pieces here and there, and it's been an evolution. The lead up to this open sourcing, and not only the Microsoft is open sourcing this thing, it's putting a patent covenant, so addressing the big concern, this scenario, this mythical scenario that was considered as like, well, Microsoft sue us. Right, and they finally saying we're not going to sue anybody. This is our promise.
When did they tell you that?
This issue, I reviewed the license earlier today. But the intention was to do the right thing for .NET.
So you've been working all these years with that cloud over your head.
Yes, and Sam Ranji many years said he was trying to convince Microsoft management that they needed to remove the sword of Damocles from Mono's head.
And, the what?
The sword of Damocles. It's
a
Greek. It's a Greek character where there's a sword on top of his head, and we don't know. One day it's gonna fall, right? So
my wife is Greek, and I should know this stuff.
You probably get the name, the spelling wrong, but the point that Sam made at the time is we need to remove these to enable Mono to succeed, and it took a lot of time.
And personally, do you feel like euphoric? Do you feel incredibly happy, or it's just another step?
No, I am very happy. I think it finally removes this cloud on top of .NET, which there were two issues, right? A lot of us knew that .NET had all of the elements of a superior technology. Technologically speaking, it was more advanced than everything else out there. Now, there's new things that have been developed that have other features, so I don't want to compare with those, but .NET has been the cream of the crop, so it's one of the best things that you can get out there. But when people thought about, well, can we use .NET? At one point somebody says, well, but why do we have to move to Unix? Why do we need to support the Mac? I'm like, all right, we'll take that out of the equation. Okay, what are we left with, right? Oh, we got Java, we got this thing, right? So while .NET was technologically incredibly advanced, it's always been removed earlier from the race because of this issue. That's one piece. And the other piece was this dark cloud on top of Mono. Now both of these are gone. And now I think that .NET can go where it could never have gone before.
So do you think the growth of .NET is going to take a real spike from here?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're ready to start contributing. We're ready to start working with Microsoft. It is interesting because not only they're releasing the code and they're doing the patent covenant, which are incredibly important pieces, but we're getting together with the engineering teams to make sure that we can immediately hit the ground running, and we can start sending patches, pull requests, collaborating together, working on the specs. The the groundwork started happening with the .NET Foundation announced back at Build.
Right. Yep.
So it's been a process of getting the foundation in place, getting a discussion forum, calling for the advisor group, all these things, and so the pieces have been building over some period. Now it's the time to actually execute. So I think it's going to be fantastic.
Okay, so that brings us to what is going to happen to Mono. What are you going to improve Mono, or are you going to help Mono developers get over to the new open source .NET? And can I ask, how big is that community?
Yeah, so I mean, it's still large, despite the fact that it's despite the fact that there was a cloud. There was a lot of people that never cared. But I need .NET. I need it now, right? So what's going to happen with Mono is a couple of things. First of all, the VM will continue to exist. I don't know for how long, but as long as I can see, as far as I'm concerned right now, just like Microsoft needs to maintain their core CLR VM and the desktop VM, and they need to maintain the way that things work because there's people that depend on these things. Now, the class libraries, what's going to happen is we're going to start replacing some of the code that wasn't even complete or missed a lot of features or has lagged behind. In particular, in the server, Mono has a big lag. Since the Novell, since we started Xamarin, essentially we abandoned the server pieces, right? So we'll take all the server pieces directly into Mono. So I think that what you'll see is that at the level of the class libraries, there's going to be a convergence between the two class libraries, as much as it's possible, right?
So you're kind of helping them move over.
Yes. So their class libraries right now don't work on Unix at all, or Linux or Mac. So we need to help them do that transition. So we'll bring some of the Mono code, we'll write some new code, we'll adapt some of the existing code to make sure that that code translates, and we'll replace ours with theirs. So eventually there will be an amalgamation of these two code bases. That is the first piece. Then there are pieces that are very tied to each runtime. So those pieces are very likely going to remain tied to those runtimes. Then the virtual machines, are difficult because Mono supports a number of scenarios, compilation modes, garbage collection modes, and things that are not really part of .NET to interrupt with Java and Objective-C. So we've done a little bit of custom changes to the VM, and it runs on certain environments. We use LVM. There's all these things that are necessary today in the Mono ecosystem that we can't really put directly into their stuff. Maybe in 5, 8 years, maybe there will be a convergence then. But the VMs, I think you should think of the VMs as they'll continue to exist. And the one thing that will improve is we'll just improve the quality of everything on top. So the flaws that Mono had will be eliminated by this process, and the limitations that .NET has will be eliminated by this process. So it's a blend of these two and get the best pieces together. So that's what it comes down to, the class libraries. And then the runtimes, they'll just exist independently.
Okay. All right, that's awesome. All right, well, thank you very much for your time, Miguel. Come down to Australia.
Yeah. Any minute.
And this is Adam Cogan signing off for SSW TV.